First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rukal Kadash, Brakabih Yahweh, Brakabih Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rukal Kadash. So, anyhow, this is sort of a follow-up to the idea that not all Israelites are going to look alike. Well, yesterday marked July 23rd, marked 7 years since my father, Buddy Britt, died. And I put up a couple videos of him. Now, looking at him and listening to him, you wouldn't think that he had the seed of Jacob, right? Because he looks like a country hick, right? You know, and he's mostly singing country songs. But in the midst of that, though, you don't know the stories of my father. So I'd just like to share a few. You know, first of all, we come to find out that, well, as a nation being scattered among the nations, we mated with the other nations. My dad could have any woman he wanted, and often did enjoy women. You know, he knew how to talk to them, he knew how to caress them, and he was very good at that. Man, there was not anything shy about my dad. Totally opposite of me. I have a bit of shyness, but you know, still have certain features of my dad. My dad could also pick up a guitar and play just about anything. He could mimic that, and kind of, he had his own sound, but yet at the same time could do that record. He never looked at musical notes or anything. He just listened, and he was able to pick up a guitar and play it. You know, country music is, you know, I have to say though that that in itself, a lot of people think, well, that's just Edomite music. Well, yes, Edomites claim that as their own, but really, truly, country comes from country blues, which comes from Jacob. Again, you know, we have most of the music talents, you know. So, my dad, you know, just, you know, he had a natural talent for that. There were some stories he told me. I didn't know everything about my father, you know, but he told me about how he would, when he was younger, you know, to make a little extra money, he used to box, you know. He was pretty good at it. You know, out of the blue, he shared that story, you know. I didn't get to see a lot of my dad when I was growing up. He married an Amalekite after my mom and him, you know, didn't work out. But, and she's the one that kept me away from my father for the most part. But she died in 1992, or 94 actually, 1994, and then my dad married another, and so I was, she actually encouraged me and my father to speak, and I got to know my father pretty good, and started learning more stories about him, but always enjoyed his singing, always enjoyed his playing, and just, he had a really calm voice about him. How do I know that he's of the seed of Jacob? Well, for one, the Spirit bears witness. Some other stories I can tell you. He comes from the South, the Mid-South, Mississippi, you know, pretty much born and raised in Natchez. He did not agree with everything. He lived during that time era where, you know, there was the white-only section and the black-only section. My dad, you know, throughout his teenage years until he enlisted, which he lied about his age to get in there, he would not even really hang out on the white side. He would go to the black side. There he'd seen B.B. King, but he would go to those clubs. He said that's where it was happening. And he told me some other stories. He says, you know, these Ku Klux Klan, they're not who they claim to be, because I can tell you a story about the Grand Poobah of the Ku Klux Klan there, and, you know, there's this colored woman, you know, hey, are you gonna come back tonight? And so the Grand Poobah himself was sleeping with a prostitute. He said that's how hypocritical they were. My dad didn't fit into the so-called white man's way of thinking. It's another thing showing that he was a Jake all along. In fact, I think part of his listing, even though he's not here now to tell the story about it, so I'm sort of telling it, I believe the main reason he enlisted to begin with was to get out of Mississippi. He only went back there one time, and That was during the funeral for my grandmother in 1982. And he ain't been back since. I went there in 2012, and yeah, I mean, pretty much, yeah, I seen some of the Underground Railroad things, all those things, and the characteristics of the rest of my family did not match that of my father. My father was a peculiar one. As we're coming into this truth, we find out, though, that the Most High preserves his bloodline and gives it to who he wants to carry the seed over to. And, well, in the case of Isaac, can Isaac have one son that will receive the seed line and another that will not? Absolutely. So, if so, our father Isaac could have two sons, one that has the seed and one that does not. Same thing with my father's family. It makes sense, right? So, my dad was a peculiar one. He was different from everybody else, and he really never looked back at Mississippi. He'd only tell stories once in a while. That's how this old boxing story. I really didn't know much about my dad's background. He didn't really have a lot of pictures when he was a kid. These things I would find later. He didn't have a bunch of photo albums. The pictures that he did have were in the military. And so he had lived pretty much a life outside of Mississippi. We all knew he was from there. And he liked a lot of the music. His favorite genre was country music. But he loved Elvis and loved Johnny Cash. But also had a natural talent for playing, mimicking them. Well, here's another part of it that, you know, and you can take a listen to this, and here's my dad playing to me in 1974 when I was born, and he's playing and sounded really good. He's playing, well, Since I Don't Have You is one of the songs, but then he goes into another one, which I'll play here. And you tell me, does this sound like your average white guy, or does this, or does he have the seed of Jacob? I'll let you decide.
Since I met you, baby, all I need, I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill, on Blueberry Hill. When I found you, on Blueberry Hill, it lingered until my dream came true. The wind and the willows play a sweet melody, but all of the vows you made were never to be. Goodbye, you thought of me still.
So that was a tape from 1974. It's really old. I mean, the baby in the background, that's me. There's other things about my life. My mother was an Edomite, I mean, obviously. So, you know, I'm going to have even more paleness than my father. But, you know, we don't look like Jake's, but the seed line was preserved. It was preserved for this time, this witness, this testimony. My father died 7 years ago as of July 23rd, and I still miss him greatly. I always will. But even as a baby, I clung to him. I did not cling to my mother whatsoever. My mother could never figure this out. You know, why is it that I only wanted my father? I did not want, you know, I rejected my mom pretty much, well, because Esau was rejected, you know. So, you know, and then just looking back on everything, you know, my mom still pushes Christianity, you know. I don't despise her. I've tried to tell the truth, but an Edomite's not going to get it. You know that story, you know, and you got so many of us that are scattered among the nations who, well, we were all raised in Babylon the Great. We weren't raised Hebrew Israelite. We weren't ever told that we were the Hebrew Israelites. So, but there was always a part of us that questioned everything. My father did not believe in the ways of the white man. He despised all the things. He really despised the way that our people were treated. He often spoke against that. He detested that. He detested the ways of the so-called white man. And that is how I know that I come from his seed line. And as a father, he was, you know, he still is missed to this day. I have depression because I miss him so much, you know. This place, America, Babylon the Great, it sucks. So you're going to have depression anyways. But he's a greater part of my depression, you know. How do I deal with that? See, an Edomite couldn't even deal with depression, couldn't deal with depression. He has to be on dope and everything. Can't go through what we go through on a daily basis. He doesn't have to live in ghettos, you know. Well, actually, these curses are coming upon the Edomites, as Apostle Tahar says, and I've seen it in my own eyes here in Reading, which is mostly Edomites here. They're homeless. And they're going through the shit that they put us through, so things are changing. But most of all, I just, you know, for anybody that knows me knows that, you know, I miss my dad, and I just figured that I'd share that amongst others. My dad, there was so many things that were good about him. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the know back in 2011 when he did die, or any time before that. I wouldn't come into this know, and I didn't really start prophesying until really last year. And as another brother put it, you're not in this truth until you start going out there and teaching. That's when you really come into this truth. So no, my father didn't receive any of this, but does my father look upon me and everything? Well, you know, we know that he'll come back. You know, he'll come back to our seed, and so hopefully I make it. I do want to make it, you know. You know, that's why I battle with depression. I still go out there and teach, you know. About to lose my car because I could not pass the PO 420 code. And I have no choice but to get rid of it because of a goddamn fucking fix-it ticket. And I can't afford another Cadillac converter, so ESO's taking the car from me. That's pretty depressing also. But it's just the things that we have to endure. These are tests, these are trials. And this is the fire that we have to go through to see if we're tried and refined. So, hopefully this has been enlightening to others. Until the next time, Shalom and Barakatah.